Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Books, Scares, and Purrs. My name's Leslie, and today we're going to have a spoiler discussion, books and show, okay? So if you haven't read the books or you don't want to be spoiled about what's going to go on moving forward on the television show, don't watch this. Oh yeah, what was I saying? We're going to discuss top 5 moments of episode 4 of season 2 of Interview with the Vampire. All right, this is in no particular order, and ultimately, I just do this to kind of corral myself from just like talking on and on about the show. All right, so number one, Claudia's theater performance of My Baby Doesn't Like Windows. This is so I don't know, like a beautiful look into like what a incredible actress Delaney Hales is. I loved her performance. Um, and where do I go from there? Let's talk about the play itself. When I was watching the play, which is bringing up the bird things, which I keep talking about, the show keeps bringing up the uh, birds with symbolism. Like I said before, season one, um, Louis, what do you call it? He refers to him as well as Claudia as Lestat's baby birds. And like that's the way that Lestat insults Claudia when calling her weak. And also the coffin that Claudia buys, it says the feathered nest. And even in this season, we see a bird come out of Lestat's throat. And so there's this reference to birds quite a bit. And so here we see Claudia as a baby bird, and she's basically she's caged in a way. This bird is caged, and this bird just wants to do whatever it wants to do. It wants to, yeah, just fly away. And the nanny basically says, "You can't do that." And it's to grave consequence. The bird dies viciously. And so this happens in the play over and over again. And so, focusing on the play, this could easily be interpreted two ways. One is this is also what happened to Claudia in the past, which is she tried to fly the nest, and there was grave consequences to her mental health, to her physical body. And also she was just treated terribly by Lestat. And but now that they're in Paris, I feel like the same thing's happening to her. And so I almost feel like the narration, I mean, not the narrative of the story is also like a warning to Claudia, like, don't step out of line. So she finds herself being a caged bird once again. So she just really left one cage for another. And I find that terrifying for her. So this could either be it could be a look at the past, but also a look into her future. And layered in that is just like how messed up it is that Armand is even making her do this play as much as she does, for making her do the play in the first place. Um, Trying to save some things to talk about later, but he Armand clearly knows like what a vulnerable subject matter this is. He does it anyway, and I feel like this is his way to try to get at Claudia, um, to hurt Claudia in a manipulative way. We just see his response in modern day Dubai when Daniel questions him. Daniel is getting straight to the points and just saying like, you're infantilizing her. When she's a grown woman by now, I think she's like in her 40s, because I think, oh my god, I wrote it down somewhere. No, I don't know where it's at. Yeah, by this time she's 42, because at the end of season one she was 36. Then they spent Claudia and Louis spent like 5 years on the road, and then 2 years like in with a coven basically. So she's like 43 years old. So she's this a 43-year-old woman. She's older than me, and yet she's being reminded of of her body and what she can't change about it. And so, yeah, I just found that like really cruel. Um, yeah, and I think it says a lot about like what she goes through, what people that are supposed to be looking out for her in leadership roles actually do, and also the person that's supposed to be like her parent brother, how they don't really stand up for her. So yeah, that was it's just cruel, horrifying, and like devastating all at once. All right. So leading on to my uh, second moment I want to discuss. This one stood out to me, but it left me confused. I'm also bringing this up to discuss with you, and so you could provide your insight. Um, Sam Reed spoke on a moment that he had to perform as Dreamstat, that he just like was having issues gauging with like what the creators wanted from him. And so I thought once I saw that moment, I would like I was just interested in seeing the moment to see like that moment put into context and see why Sam Reed found it like a difficult piece to navigate. And that moment was in the museum with Armand and Louis and Dreamstat. And Armand decides to be vulnerable and tell Louis about his history as a way to say, like, um, this is me, and also talks in depth about, like, well, am I really the sum of my history? I'm the person in front of you, that kind of thing. But when Armand is telling his tale, he's connecting some of the people in his like vampiric life to Lestat, to Louis. But then this whole time, like at some point, Dreamstat starts to like shake his head a little bit, and he like screams in frustration back, "Ha!" And I'm totally gonna bust out my phone because I ended up reaching out to someone. I reached out to our criminal biscuits detectives because I did not understand that moment. Actually, when I saw it, I thought, oh, okay, I thought it would make perfect sense once I got there. And so I'm going to read this to you. So I wrote like what's the meaning between Dreamstat saying "ha" because that confused me, and then Vampire Chronicles underscore responded, oh, because I was bringing up Santino, and they said no. Santino's name appeared in the Talamasca files. The Dreamstat scream was weird too, for them as well. In an interview, Sam mentioned that it was like the way Louis is imagining how Lestat would react to Armand, connecting his story directly to Louis through Magnus or something similar. Yet I think it was so random and somewhat like out of place. Because yeah, we are used to seeing like the actual Lestat give like big reactions at times, but that one didn't make sense. And then someone else stepped in because I still felt like still didn't understand that moment because I felt like when Dreamstat says "ha," it's because there's something about what Armand is saying that rings false. But I don't know what that is because although I read the books, I don't remember like everyone's connection to who. And so Nicholas underscore de underscore Lenfant responded and says, I think Dreamstat shouts "ha" because Armand says that Magnus was once a member of Armand's coven, which he never was. That said, Armand's recollection of his mortal youth was the only time I felt Dreamstat was intrusive. And I imagine Louis felt that too. And then they go on to say, to elaborate, Magnus was always deemed a heretic to the coven. He was an alchemist who stole the dark gift from a chained up, buried vampire to be. The coven buried newly made vampires in graves, and only those with strength to rise anyway became vampires. But Magnus never lived within Armand's coven. And so, yeah, I just like appreciated them like clarifying that because I didn't understand. And I know Magnus was like a rogue vampire, but there's very little about Lestat's maker that I remember other than he was like a rogue vampire. Yeah, but yeah. So I don't know if anyone else needed that clarification that has like read the books but maybe doesn't remember that. So yeah, I just felt like that was an important moment and I didn't know how to navigate it. I also want to talk about this moment because we're seeing Armand being translated very much like he was in the books. And when I say that, I was thinking about the orange origins of like Armand being a young kid that was forced into prostitution. So like grooming that went on there, and like clearly some terrible, horrifying childhood. And I find that very telling because man, did like the lights. I felt like a candlelight went on because I just realized something from that being pointed out. It's like one of those things that's in the back of my mind, but it's not until I see it um, play out that I really see like the significance of it. And that's the fact that Armand is someone, it doesn't matter how old he is, that's part of his past. And he's now fallen in love with someone in a relationship with someone that formerly was a pimp. So he's with someone that trafficked humans. And I just find that like dynamic incredibly fascinating. We have someone that was a former pimp and a former prostitute, and now they're in love. And that's just like such a toxic dynamic at play because we do see how Louis later on, not to go too off on a tangent, he kind of like there's another scene where he kind of brings out that like pimp Louis part of him to take charge, and how like Armand falls like into place with that. Um, and that's like such a toxic like power dynamic, and it really speaks to how people um, will unfortunately sometimes like repeat cycles when they've been through trauma and not realize it. And so that blew my mind. That was wild because also, as you know, Book Louis was not a pimp, but he was like, he owned a plantation, so still human trafficking. But I found that like even I found it even more enriching and relevant that the adaptation made Louis um, a pimp, someone that owns a brothel. And that brings me to number three, the restaurant scene between Santiago and well, the whole what do you call it? The whole theater troupe is there, and like Santiago and Louis get into it, and I love this scene so much because although we saw like a little moments here and there of this scene, seeing the full thing just like really spoke to my fangirl heart because we see a moment from the books adapted to screen, but just like in a it's its own iteration. It's an adaptation. So I love that we get Santiago mimicking Louis, which happens in the books, right when they first initially meet. But I feel like they took that moment and then like enriched it because, and as in the books, Santiago and Louis meet and they right off the bat don't like each other, and it all starts with Santiago mimicking Louis, and that kind of sets them off like they rub each other the wrong way. And Louis calls Santiago a buffoon, but instead they held off on that moment, and I like that they did because it's still there, but it's like after the friction of them two has finally like hit a boiling point, right? And so I like that it's here that Santiago is using it to push his buttons because he dislikes Louis so much. Louis falls asleep at his plays. Louis gets to do whatever he wants. Louis now sleeping with someone that Santiago used to sleep with. Now, um, Louis' little sister gets to have this big part in a play, and now we're not really seeing Santiago being like the center of attention on stage. So there's just like so much that's bothering Santiago to push him to that point. And I feel like he also did it on purpose. Like he was pushing Louis' buttons on purpose in front of everyone to also show Armand's weakness, that there was once again not going to be any punishment for whatever Louis is up to. And so, and that was also, we're also seeing like at the same time, Armand exert his power, right? Which is like he made all like everyone except Santiago and Louis freeze. And I don't know if that was like by choice that he does that, or if he actually does also have the capability to make Louis and Santiago freeze as well. I don't really know. Like I know he's an old vampire, but Louis was also made by Lestat, and he's like a strong vampire too. So I don't really know where like the power dynamics vampirically lie, right, between like the three of them. But that was like an incredible scene. It was incredibly telling, and it just shows like how much Santiago has figured out at this point. All right, now we're gonna go to the fourth scene, or the number four that I chose, um, which is a quieter scene, but I thought it was really important, and that's the bedroom scene with Armand and Louis in Paris in Louis' apartment. So at this point, this is after um, Armand gets called out by Santiago and his coven about like what Louis gets to be up to, and also like Armand getting shamed in a way because he thinks that him and Louis are like companions, but Louis says they're not yet. Anyways, getting to my point, I thought this was like really important because time and time again, so far in the relationship of Louis and Armand, uh, Louis like rebuffs him. It takes a lot of effort on the part of Armand for them to even get to this point where they have like a romantic relationship. Um, in any way, and they're still not there because he's kind of like Louis is kind of treating Armand like his side piece basically, and not committing when Armand wants a commitment. So we just see like, yeah, that whole dynamic. Um, what really stuck out to me in this moment was that Louis is practicing um, turning on what do you call it? Lighting a candle. So he's lighting a candle and trying to put it out with his mind, and he's going back and forth. And he tells Armand he when it comes to his powers, they come into play like he's able to use them effectively when he's angry. And that's something that like is interesting that he consciously is aware of that, because I notice that's honestly that's the only time he uses his power really, especially in the first season. He spends so much time rejecting his vampiric nature that he only really uses it or comes out vicious, and uses his powers once he's been like slighted by someone. And so I find that interesting that he now consciously knows that it's not just about like that's the only time he wants to use it. It's almost like that's the only way he knows how in a way. And so there it's twofold. It's that, but it's also Armand's response because Armand says, I try to think about the vulnerability of the object. And I found that so telling. The fact that he says that I try to find the vulnerability in the object really shows like the tactic that he uses on others. And it's not just about like how he puts his vampiric power at play, but how he uh, navigates power dynamics, right? So we see him doing that to Claudia. And if we want to talk about power dynamics beyond vampiric, that's exactly what he does with her in the play. He knows what her vulnerability is, so he's pushing those buttons because he wants to shame her. He wants her to go crazy. He wants her out of the way, but he's doing it in a very like manipulative way. And I also feel like this is gonna I'm gonna stick with that, but let's hold on to what Armand said because this is also going to lead me on to number five. Daniel uncovers um, some documents, what do you call it? Photos, by looking up San Francisco and also looking up his name. But as we go there, I want to focus on a couple of things. Because Armand said that, I realized that the times that Daniel Malloy starts to remember a little bit of San Francisco or something happens is when he's in an emotionally vulnerable state. So I feel like, however, Armand used his powers on him back in San Francisco is linked to his vulnerability, to a vulnerable emotional state. And that's how he was able to manipulate his vampiric powers. And because that's the tactic that Armand uses, I think that's why now in present day Dubai, why Daniel is uncovering these memories is because Louis is poking at vulnerable moments um, in Daniel emotionally and mentally because he's digging around. And it's, yeah, it might be bringing up some memories, but I don't think he would really be able to get to them if he did not hone in on vulnerability. And so it's the tactic that Armand used, and now that ultimately is like recovering these memories. That's what I think is going on now. And it did not hit me like what was a trigger until I was trying to figure out why is it coming up? Um, Clearly it's in a federal state, but why? But as soon as Armand said that about using the vulnerability of the object, I thought that's what it is. That's what's going on. And I bring that up more so because when Daniel is looking at these photos, and I can't remember, it's a mix of like a little memory that starts to flicker early in the episode and also is paired with like towards the end when he starts looking at the photos and starts to remember. And that is that in a memory we're trying to piece together, uh, Armand says to Daniel, kind of like that profile look. Um, Basically, like a girl wanted to sleep with Daniel, but he would not until she put a bag over her head. And then mixed in with that was a memory of a guy with a bag over his head. So here's my question. Did what Armand say actually happen? Because he's putting him in, like, I'm assuming, like, let's just call it a hypnotic state. Did that really happen? Or is Armand trying to hide the memory of a guy with a bag over his head and link it to that and be like, no, this guy with a bag over his head, this isn't happening. You actually um there was a girl and she wanted to sleep with you and you told her you wouldn't unless you had a bag over your head or over her head. And I wonder if that's what they're doing. Because if that's what they're going with it, then the um the theory that's going around about Daniel's first wife, Alice, actually not being Alice, but being Armand. Now I feel like that there's like a potential for that to be true. Because the whole time I'm like, no, I don't want that to be happen. There's too many issues with that because if Alice doesn't exist, um, don't you think it would be weird, like that uh, Daniel's written all these books, one of them being a revered memoir, Haight and Ashbury, and no one's what do you call it? Checked the facts about like simple things like who he's been previously married to. That doesn't make any sense. But if he was with Alice, like if Alice actually exists, but some of his memories with Alice don't make any sense because those moments with Alice weren't actually with Alice, they were with Armand. And Armand maybe just trying to hide the memories of him, kind of like embed it in with like bunch it up with uh Daniel being with Alice, that kind of makes more sense. Like I can kind of buy that. But that moment really stuck out to me. With that said, there are some crazy, crazy theories. Let me know what you think about that whole Alice, Armand is Alice thing. Because I don't know. That didn't even cross my mind. There's so many of the people like in the fandom that have come up with that. And I I'm fine with it being like I just don't want it to be like entirely he's Alice. I don't know if that would really make any sense. Um, for like a journalist that people know. I don't know. Also, amongst like all the victims lists that Daniel sees, it's not just about like the fact that there's so many different names. There's a name that his cursor lands on, and it might just be random, but it was Catherine something, Catherine something, and I don't remember Daniel Malloy ever bringing up the name of his second wife. I know the first wife's name was Alice. There was another photo of someone named Alice Lopez, but he didn't react to it, and that was like last week's episode. But this one really threw him, and I don't know if it's just like seeing all those names of people that were dead. Um, but also there's like a photo, and I could be wrong. It's Armand in daylight. It's a black and white photo, and he's taking someone out of like a victim out of Louis' apartment. But it looks like someone's helping him, and they have gloves on, which we see like the Dubai assistants have on, right? They have gloves on and they have a hoodie on, and I can't really tell. They have like kind of loose curly hair. So I thought that might have been Daniel Malloy, but it's too fuzzy, it's too grainy. I can't really tell. So let me know who you think that is. But there's something else I want to say. I feel like I'm completely wrong, but I'm going to throw it out there. I mean, I think that the person might be Daniel Malloy, but when I was looking at it closer, it looks like the hair is curly, but like some of the hair is dark, and then some of it's like white right here. And I remember Daniel Malloy saying something like his wife, I don't know if it was her eyebrow or her hair, like had a streak of blonde in it, and she would always dye it brunette. And he remembered he really liked that about her. And he said that in season one. And I was like, is he mixing up who he was with? I don't know. My mind wanders and goes into all sorts of different theories, but I'm gonna try to cut it short for once and not talk on and on and on. Let me know what you thought about this episode, these type, top 5 moments I picked. Was there anything that I like didn't pick up on that you'd like to discuss? I'm here. Subscribe to my channel, support me, press the like button, and I'll see you in the chat.